29 years on the Bering Sea. I've signed the checks for more than 2 million gallons of diesel fuel, and I've watched the bows of 4 different vessels rise and fall on that water. People on shore, they have a romantic idea about it. They think a captain's job is to wrestle with the ocean, to heroically keep his crew safe. That's not it. The job is to manage risk to a level that fills the hold. It's all just a calculation. You do the math on fuel, on time, on the weather, on the weak link in your gear. Your entire life is a set of numbers you carry in your head. Most of the time, your math is right. But this story is about the one time it was wrong. It's about a choice I made, a radio I turned off, and the 41 minutes of silence the sea gave me in return. I'm not telling this for entertainment. I'm telling it because it happened, and it needs a witness. If you've lived this life, or you want to understand the accounting, leave a word below. I read them. You learn to trust the sound of your own engine. 29 years I've been on the Bering Sea, and I can tell you more about a boat by the hum that comes up through the deck plates than most surveyors can with a clipboard. The Kestrel had a good sound, an old 1271 Detroit diesel, 2-stroke. Not quiet, not clean, but it had a rhythm. A deep, steady drum beat at 9 knots that meant you were making money, that you were solvent. You leave Dutch Harbor in October, you don't hear another sound you can trust for 3 months. Just that one. It's a machine, the whole thing. The boat, the gear, the men. You learn to see it all that way. I had 3 on deck that season. Len and Dale, they were fixtures. They knew the work. They moved without thinking, like they were part of the hydraulics. Then there was Bobby, the greenhorn, all elbows and ambition. I'd watch him on a 12-hour watch, in a 10-foot swell, just getting hammered by spray that was half ice. He'd be fighting a pot, stacking it wrong, but he wouldn't stop. And I wouldn't be thinking, that kid's got heart. I'd be thinking, he can work 16 hours before he breaks. He's strong. That was his value in the equation. That's the math you have to do. Every day is the same calculation. How much fuel are you burning? How many pots are you hauling? What's the count? That's the only language that matters. The block and tackle screams when a full pot of Bertie comes over the rail, and Len shouts the count. The sorting table slams. The diesel fumes mix with the salt and the bait, and the whole world smells like cold, hard work. It's not a life you love. It's a life you've earned. You get comfortable in the routine of it, the weight of it. You get used to the pressure. You forget there's any other way to be. Your whole world shrinks down to the circle of light on the deck and the number on the haul count. We were 2 weeks into the run and behind. The numbers weren't adding up. I'd spent a little too much time in the yard back in Dutch Harbor before the season started. Had to look at a section of the hull, some wear on the port side, low and aft. Stood there in the yard office with 2 quotes in my hand. One for a new 1/4-inch steel plate, done right. The other was for a patch, a field weld, a quarter of the price. I remember walking out to the dry dock afterward, running my hand over the new seam. It was just steel, I told myself. It felt cold, too smooth under my glove. It didn't feel right, that weld. It was a low hum underneath the engine's noise for the next 2 days, a note that was off-key. You tell yourself it's just steel. You tell yourself the sea doesn't know the difference, but you do. We burned fuel, pulling empty pots, the deck silent. The math I'd done in the yard office felt dumber with every gallon of diesel we burned for nothing. And then one string came up heavy. So heavy the hydraulics whined in a way you usually only hear when something's about to give. Len was at the rail, peering over the side, and he just looked back at me in the wheelhouse and nodded. The pot broke the surface, and it was plugged, full of bear dye. Big, clean, beautiful crab. I looked at the sonar, and there they were, a city of them, right under us. This was it, the run that pays for everything, the run that makes a bad decision right. The sea had just given me permission. For 36 hours, nobody slept more than an hour at a time. It's a blur of screaming block and tackle, the slam of the sorting table, and the constant, dry, clicking sound of thousands of crabs scrabbling over each other in the hold. The adrenaline gets a metallic taste to it after a while. You just work. Every couple of hours, I'd step away from the deck lights and check the weather facts. It's an old machine. Spits out a map on this thin, flimsy paper that always curls up. And every time, the isobars were tighter. The black needle on the barometer mounted to the bulkhead agreed. It had dropped 4 millibars, then 5. That's a warning. That's the sea clearing its throat. But then I'd look out the window at the deck, see Len and Dale moving in that rhythm, another full pot coming over the rail. And the lines on that piece of paper just didn't seem as real as the numbers piling up in the hold. It was just after 2 in the morning. The whole wheelhouse was warm and thick with the smell of fresh coffee. I just poured a cup, and a voice cut right through the hum of the engine and the hiss of the heater. It wasn't shouting. It was strained, controlled. That's what made me listen. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is the fishing vessel Aleutian Provider." He gave his position. I glanced at my chart without even thinking. 12 miles. Close. In that water, at that temperature, that's next door. The voice came again, reading the numbers, and this time I could hear the engine noise behind him. It sounded wrong. I stood there, listened. No one else answered. We were the only ones this far out on the line. I looked at the haul count on the whiteboard by the door. We were 3/4 full. Another 6, maybe 7 hours, and we were done. Heading for home with the biggest haul of the season. I looked at the barometer. Still dropping. I looked at the chart. 12 miles to him. 4 hours. Minimum. 4 hours off the crab, with the weather turning. I did the math. I picked up my coffee cup, that white one with the little chip on the rim. The porcelain was warm. The deck was humming under my boots. I took a sip. Then I reached over to the console and switched off the main radio. The static died. The man's voice was gone, and the only sound left in the world was my engine, making money. It came at 03:40 in the morning, a sound that didn't belong to the sea. It wasn't a wave hitting the hull, not the engine, not the hydraulics. It was a single, clean, explosive bang. A cannon shot, low and aft on the port side. The steel deck plates jumped under my boots. A tremor went through the whole frame of the boat, a violent shudder, and then the lights went out. The steady, reassuring drumbeat of the Detroit diesel was just gone. And in that first second of black silence, a new smell hit me. The smell of pure, cold seawater where it shouldn't be. In the engine room. I didn't have to see it. I knew. The weld. The goddamn weld. The bill had just come due. The boat took a list to port almost immediately. Not a roll, but a heavy, settled lean. Dale came stumbling into the wheelhouse, his eyes wide in the dark. He was fumbling with the emergency handheld VHF, his hand shaking so badly he couldn't work the clip on the battery pack. He was saying my name, but the words were just noise. I took the radio from him. My own hands were perfectly steady. I clipped the battery on, felt it click into place, twisted the knob. The little red light came on. I pressed the transmit button, and I spoke into the plastic grill. My own voice sounded like a stranger's, flat, unhurried. "Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is the fishing vessel Kestrel." I gave our position. Then I let go of the button. There was nothing but static. I was talking to a dead machine. It was the same question the man from the Aleutian Provider must have had. Is anyone even listening? I sent the crew for the survival suits. They moved. They did what they were trained to do. The list was getting worse. You could hear the water now, not just smell it. A sloshing, heavy sound from below decks. The groan of bulkheads under a pressure they weren't built to take. Len got the life raft deployed. I heard the hiss of the CO2 canister, a sound I'd only ever heard in drills. They were shouting for me, but I didn't move. This is the part I never told the Coast Guard. The part I never told anyone. They were in the raft, tethered to the sinking boat, waiting for me. I just stood there in the wheelhouse. The boat was settling fast now. I held the cold plastic of the handheld, listening to nothing, to the steady, unchanging hiss of the static. And I waited. I timed it on my watch. The water wasn't waves hitting the windows anymore. It was a quiet, insistent lapping, climbing its way up the glass. I watched the Black Sea rise, the boat groaning its last, and I listened to that silence on the radio for 41 minutes. It wasn't an absence of noise. It was a presence. It was the exact shape and weight of the silence I had given that other boat 3 months before. It was a debt being paid, and my turn to pay it. A searchlight cut the dark in half, and there it was, the silhouette of a Coast Guard boat, rising on a swell. A voice came over a hailer, impossibly calm. "Kestrel, this is Coast Guard 44362. We're alongside." And just like that, it was over. They pulled us out of the raft one by one. Bobby was crying. Len was just staring. I don't think I felt anything at all. One of the guardsmen, a kid no older than Bobby, handed me a mug. It was thick, heavy ceramic, the kind you can't break. He'd filled it with coffee, hot and syrupy sweet from a thermos. I held it in my bare hands, trying to feel the warmth, but it tasted like nothing. I stood on the cutter's deck and watched her go. The Kestrel didn't roll or break apart like you see in the movies. She just settled. The stern went down first, slow and stubborn. Then the bow lifted high out of the water, showing the hull, and in the beam of the searchlight, I could see the dark scar of the patch. Then she just slid backward, under the waves. The mast lights flickered once and were gone. I stood there, with my hands on the cold steel rail of a boat that wasn't mine, and the only thing I could think about was that chipped coffee cup, sitting in the galley sink. I wondered if it slid off the counter, if it broke, or if it just filled with water and went down with the rest of it. I'd left it for the sea. The insurance investigator's report used the words substandard hull repair. The bank used other words. I signed the bankruptcy papers in a quiet, carpeted office in Seattle. It took maybe 5 minutes. After a lifetime of noise, of engines and screaming hydraulics and the constant wind, the loudest sound I'd ever heard was the click of the lawyer's pen when he slid the papers across the desk. I went bankrupt the moment I turned off the radio. This was just the paperwork. I live in my father's old house now, in Anacortes. He always said this town was the end of the line. From the front porch, if the wind is right, you can smell the salt. I don't go down to the docks. I sold all my gear. I never set foot on another boat. I found out in the spring what happened to the Aleutian Provider. A crabber found some wreckage in a trawl net. No survivors. I never knew their names, but I know their silence. That's the thing that changed. Before, the sea was a place of calculation. Now, it's a place of accounting. Those 41 minutes I stood in the wheelhouse of my sinking boat, that wasn't punishment. It wasn't the sea's revenge. It was a lesson. It was just showing me the other side of the ledger, showing me what the silence I created for another man actually felt like. The debt isn't the boat. It isn't the money. The debt is knowing I could have been the voice that answered, and I chose to be the static. You don't get over that. You just carry it. The coffee I drink now comes from a plain white mug I bought at the hardware store. There are no chips on the rim. It has no history. Every morning I pick it up and my thumb searches for that little flaw, that familiar broken place. But it isn't there. It's smooth all the way around.